So hello everybody and welcome to this episode of CFO 4.0. So today I am talking to Mark Laine Toner, who is the Financial Director of Evri. And I'm going to let him introduce himself because we are going to talk about one of my favourite topics, which everybody knows, which is transformation. So welcome, Mark. Really lovely to have you on the show.
Thank you, Hannah. It's a pleasure. Should I give you a little bit of background about myself and just give a bit more details to what is a finance director at Evri? So I joined Evri only about a year and a half ago, but a lot of my experience has been in retail. So I spent most of my career walking around the big retailers from Sainsbury's through to Asda, and then I ended up at Co-op for a big stint of about 8 years as well. And then I decided I wanted a bit of a change, so I came to Evri, which is all about parcel delivery. But through that journey, probably gone through maybe 4 or 5 finance transformations, and then latterly in Co-op actually led quite a few of them myself. So have had quite a lot of experience in applying transformation, but whether that be through structures, but also through data and reporting and improved tools, etc. So quite looking forward to this conversation today.
Yeah, no, I'm super excited. And how did you find the transition? Because obviously you spent so long in retail to then make the jump over to a completely different industry. Was it a big shock to the system?
It was okay. It's I think I chose wisely. It's a very fast-paced business. I'll almost talk to it like being like water, because the parcels never stop flowing. But in retail, it's very busy as well, and it's very fast-paced. So it was probably quite similar to what I'm used to, and because there's quite a lot of logistics in retail, actually, it was also kind of expanding out on something I already knew a little bit about. So it wasn't too bad, I guess, in summary. But very interesting to learn a new industry, and I probably had got a little bit stuck in retail. I really loved my time in retail, but I wanted a new challenge, and I think the next role I do will probably be in a slightly different but related industry again.
Yeah, because there is always that piece, isn't there, about, I always find, because I swap between industries, because obviously implementing across different industries, you actually learn a lot by shifting from industry to industry. And there's always a best practice that industry is really good at, whether it's procurement, whether it's stock management, or, how they do data. Like there's always something that I find that industry does really well or differently that you can then learn from and take to another.
Yeah, that's a good point. Especially, I think logistics, because it's so focused on there's huge amounts of supply bases to deal with. It is a very procurement heavy area, and that's probably something I hadn't really spent that much in, because most of my work in retail was through the ops and through the stores. So yeah, it was actually quite that was a good one. And I think also I would never underestimate the difference between different types of retailers or different businesses doing the same thing culturally and through the tech and the things that they use as well. So yes, I do think moving around does give you like a different level of experience and you then pick these things up, don't you? And then you apply them through, because you then remember the circumstances and you can think, oh yeah, actually, when I was here, that was kind of quite similar. So therefore, actually, I could probably try that out in my next place. So yeah, it does. And you definitely hone your model, I think, of how to apply certain changes.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's always something to learn. I guess the question you've got to ask yourself before you go into a new role is how much learning do I want to have in this new one? And where do I want to sit? So talking of transformation specifically, tell us a little bit about some of the transformation projects you've been involved with.
Yeah, I think in the biggest one that I have led or led most of was in the Co-op, and it was actually primarily a structural change and a complete redesign of the operating model for finance. It was challenging because it was through the pandemic, so we were trying to land a significant structural change through the Co-op during the pandemic, and I wouldn't advise that. That was very, very
lesson
difficult.
one.
Yeah, that wasn't too easy. What we were doing was we were centralizing quite a lot of the analytical and reporting functions into one place, and then keeping the business partners kind of almost in the business unit. So you had this one central core of all insights production, reporting, planning, for the whole of the kind of the group. And I was heading up that team, and we were just bringing it all together. And I think it, from the kind of structural change in transformations, I think you need to be really careful about the sequence that you apply them. So we were doing it through a pandemic. It was very difficult to engage with people and keep them on that journey. But also the business really wanted us to save money. So they pushed us really hard to take heads out very quickly. And we hadn't really changed any of the processes. But I had to take, I think, it probably was about a 10%, haircut on headcount. So, it was going from like 70 to kind of it was probably 78 through to sort of like 60 people. So it was really quick. And we didn't know all of the areas, and we went, right, we're going to bring it together, and then we're going to figure it out. and I think I think process in all these cases, I think it's very similar to systems and data. Getting your processes right and really thinking about the ways of working, the processes around any change is really the start. And whilst it was it felt like it was the right thing to do to go at pace and try and reduce headcount so that we could save the business money, actually in the long term it probably actually didn't really save us that much money, and we're having to unwind some of it. And I think actually, unfortunately, I think they've probably changed the structure again since I left. So it wasn't as successful as we would have hoped. But I do think it was to do with more around being prepared for the change, taking people along that journey, but then also having kind of clear processes and changes around those processes before you then start to change the structures.
Yeah, one of the things I always say is I think if people spent as much time planning the change as they plan the decision to change, I think a lot of more change projects would actually have a lot more impact.
Yeah,
because 100% what you say is that once people have made the decision, it's almost like, right, I just want to do it now. Especially if expectations have been set higher up the chain, that's a challenging situation to be in.
Yeah, and there's loads of dependencies always with almost a reduction in headcount or the realignment of headcount. But what becomes quite complicated when you are changing structures is that they're confidential. So you can't really engage with the team deeply as deeply as you would if it was something that didn't have a headcount reduction implication. But also we had lots of dependencies around the process, but it was also around the tech, and it was utilization of different tech to then reduce. We were also going to use automation and bots to try and reduce the work for the team. You're also looking at planning systems and things like that, and all of those things. Unfortunately, because they were all in the pipeline and all coming, they didn't come quick enough, and therefore you end up getting into this situation which I call the stuck team, where you really want to change, you're really up for the change, but you don't have any time to do it. And that, I think, is one of the biggest challenges with any transformation, whether there is people implications and structural moves, but also to any data or reporting or kind of systems change. Everybody generally wants to change, and it's not that difficult to sell the why, but actually being able to enact the change is quite tough because you haven't really got the time. That's why you need to change. So it kind of you end up in a bit of a spiral. So how do you unlock that spiral to find the time to then invest that into change? And when I came into Evri, I almost spent 70% of my time on the change that I was trying to land. I'd say it was that high, even though I had a big role in business partnering the operations team. You have to dedicate that time through planning, as you said, Hannah, but also through just thinking about the roadmap, the implications on the people, how you're going to build the vision, and what kind of technology you're going to use, the transitions, what's happening first. It takes a lot of thinking, and unless you wake up every day thinking, what am I going to change today? It's not going to happen, because the first thing you do is you walk in and then there'll be a load of emails and then there'll be a load of requests from the senior leadership asking for more reports and more insights. So every single day you've got to have that change on your agenda. And maybe mine was 70 to 30, but my team should have at least been 20, 30% of their time on change. And then that's something that we talked about all the way through last year was, what have you changed this week? What have you learned this week? How much time did you invest? And you almost need to have like some symbolic changes where you celebrate along the way, but you have to kind of make that first leap. You've got to push through. And one of ours was that we, in Evri, was we had to move the reporting from every single person within my team that were involved in the reporting on a weekly basis to a small subset of the team, which would then be able to incubate it and really make it work better. So moving from, let's say 18 people being involved in producing a weekly flash to 4. And that was really quite difficult to do. But as soon as we managed to almost get it over there, then that was almost the catalyst. Then be able to then continue to work it. The business partners became freer. They were able to invest. And then it all started to unravel a little bit and get less stuck. And then we were able to then get the momentum behind it. It does take, you've got to try and get the air. And once you've got the air, you then fill that with your change, not with lots and lots of other things.
It's a really good point, Mark. And I actually really love, I talk about the snowball rolling down the hill effect. Like you just need that one or two, and sometimes it can be quite small changes to create a little bit of capacity.
Yeah.
Then that capacity generates capacity for more change, which creates capacity for more.
Absolutely.
And actually it just continues to grow. And that's why I say planning's so important, because if you can find those little quick wins, and because it creates excitement, doesn't it? Oh my God, we've done that bit. And everyone goes, all right, I'm in. We see the value. Let's do the next bit. And you roll. But if you don't get that first win, as you say, if you're currently fighting just to find time to make these small changes, that's where it gets really challenging.
Yeah, quick wins that was what we used. That was the word we used. So the moving the flash wasn't a quick win. That was structural. We had to relay the team out, but we called it a quick wins program. Like I had brought in a lovely guy to support me who I've worked with before to help us do the data change and the reporting changes. But whilst he was fixing the architecture of setting up, where we were going to store our data, all the connections and all the stuff that I don't really understand. He also had a quick wins element on top, where he would have almost a workshop where on a Thursday, the team would come to him and say, right, I really want to just try and get this sorted, or I really need to just try and simplify this. And we'd use lots of different techniques, whether even through just Excel, but sometimes through other technologies, just to alleviate the pressure. And as you said, Hannah, then you just then get a little bit more time, and that snowball effect does work, but it does take work to get there, and you have to be really, really focused to try and push that through. And then it does then create, and it does. I would say a year and a half on now, we are probably now feeling the benefits of that, and there's more time in the business partnering to invest properly into the business partnering. The team are then getting more time to invest into the change, and it doesn't feel like it's so forced now. It does feel like it's a bit more natural, and along that journey, people then start to believe a bit more, because when you're the stuck team, they're like, you've waltzed in and you're telling us that we've been doing it wrong all this time and you've got a better way, but we've been through this 3 times before and it's not very good and it never worked before. Yeah. And then you're like, no, it's going to be different this time. It's going to be different. I'll tell you why. It's going to be because we've got a different approach. Yeah. And then until you can kind of evidence that a little bit to people, you maybe don't always get the believers. Some people can jump straight on it, but others need to see it. So you need to win some hearts and minds along the way, and everybody's a bit different, but you do need to show people that, it is possible. And we spent, quite a lot of time, writing the vision around, what we wanted to do. And, if I kind of summarized how we did it here at Evri, and we're still on our journey, but, there's almost a diagnosis stage of, what's going on. It's not part of my 90-day plan. I'm then kind of diagnosing, understanding the issues, and then well, what would be what does it feel like it should move to? What would why would we want to go there? What would be the benefits of why we should do that? Then to moving on to setting up the team and the kind of way you're going to implement it. And I quite favour the agile approach, so quite like sprints and energy and celebrate along the way rather than quite big kind of structural waterfall programs. And then you actually then just systematically kind of working through and really driving out the change. So kind of followed that cycle, but along the way there's points, and we didn't have a great, I don't know, you call them different things in different businesses, but like talkback score, like an engagement score. But one thing that I was really, really keen that we did was we celebrated and recognized people on the journey. So, we just recently done a survey, and I think out of 10, I think we were like 8 or 9. And it showed the effort that we'd put into that to recognize people's successes against our new vision and our new kind of, ways of working. And so, the team are recognizing that person themselves, that we are celebrating the journey as we go, and we make sure we call out every little bit of success that has enabled us to move along that journey and it get a bit easier. Because ultimately, when you get these things working well, it makes everybody's job easier, because you're using tools to great effect. Everybody knows their roles properly. The jobs are more enjoyable because you're getting into the fun stuff rather than spending all your time just crunching numbers. So yeah, it's not a tough sell. It is just more about the process and implementing it, and then people believing by implementation and celebration along the way.
Yeah, and that's, for me, that's why the planning element's so important, because you need to find the ways, like you said it really good way, to feel the change. They need to experience small amounts of change, and then that enables them to look forward to the next wave of change, because they've seen it. It's not been that scary. It has delivered. It's not just somebody standing at the front going, "This is what we're going to do." I love that. I love that comment you made about waltzing in with the new way of working. And actually, there's a lot in there. I'd love to unpick in terms of how you guys approached. But I think celebrating successes is something we don't do often enough. And I'm guessing that wasn't just in the people leading the project. That was individuals whose jobs were changing as you went in there. Absolutely, you were celebrating the fact that they were able to do their new role.
Yeah, and that it is them more really than it is the people doing the change. And it is it's got to be every little bit as well, because there's got to be a culture of celebrating. Because I would say that accountants are probably the worst at recognizing success, and I think it's partly because if it's not done, it's not done, is it? It is. We do have this kind of complete to finisher thing, don't we? Where it's still not finished, so I can't really recognize success. Yeah, but it's much better than yesterday, and
it's not perfect.
Yeah,
it's the perfectionist. I think in finance,
it is the perfectionist. That's the right word. And when I reflect, because we've just gone through our year end, and we're then doing our kind of objectives. So I drew out a little bit what we'd achieved, and even I surprised myself about when I look back to what we were doing before, just as I landed, and then what we are now, kind of how we're operating now. It was quite a step change. But there's a big piece around well-being as well, because I came into a team that, if we go back to that engagement score, scored a 3 on work-life balance. So Oof. It wasn't a very nice place to work for them, and that was absolutely, because I knew this was an enabler. It was absolutely, if I can make it easier for them to do their jobs, they're not going to have to work long hours, and that was that was critical, because I'm very, very big advocate of well-being and getting that balance within the working week. And I don't feel like you need to dedicate as much time as some people feel like they end up having to do. And whilst it's not fixed and there's still bagloads to go, that's all a good step forward year over year. So recognition that some of the stuff's working, but still more to do. So yeah, it was quite nice to see progress, but there is still more to go up. But celebrating success along the way is absolutely critical.
I love how you're showing your perfectionist tendencies here, Mark, by saying we're not quite there yet. It's not quite perfect, but we're not there. And that is so true. We do. I see transformation as a journey. I don't think you'll ever be done, because as soon as you get to where you wanted to be a few years back, there's going to be a new aim and a new view to where you want to be.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, I think I am quite future focused, and I am like a very big change advocate. So I think I probably drive my team a little bit mad sometimes as well about what I want to do. But yeah, I think it's good, a bit of tension. No, I think one of the roles of the finance director, CFO, is not to push the team too hard that it actually does move them into kind of poor work-life balance and potentially impacts on their well-being. But you need to find the right tension point, because actually success comes from that real kind of that lovely sweet spot of feeling a little bit stressed and working at your best, but not always on. But at those points where you really need to hit a deadline, make the change deadline just as important as the budget deadline, and a few things like that. Because the tension in delivery usually, I think, leads to quality development as well. So if you push someone out of their comfort zone into something maybe they're not quite as familiar with, and sometimes change is that kind of opportunity. You learn more when you're under just that little bit of tension, when you're a little bit uncomfortable, and you have to kind of raise your game to get there. And I think change represents a fantastic opportunity for people to really kind of grow themselves and spread out into new skills. So there's a balance, and you've got to, I think as a leader, always try and find that one where I was talking to like one of my heads of, and he was saying, "Oh, Mark, we work quite well because I'm the one who was always trying to protect the team, and you're always trying to push them." I said, "Yeah, but that's because what I'm trying to do is just find that healthy tension where we're trying to drive forward as a team, and we're keeping the foot on the gas, but we're not flooring it all the time. It's that art of just trying to find that balance." And so that, I think that's something you don't always get right, and sometimes you can overwhelm the team. And then in other cases, it might be that you're just going a bit slow, and you could have gone quicker. So that accelerator bit is quite an interesting one for leaders, I think, to think about how much are you pushing down on the team, and how you're driving forward on that change versus and also just the other things, like I said about the budget. The budget's important, but change should be as equally important. And if change isn't in your top three, probably not prioritizing it high enough, and then therefore how much you're then pushing on the levers to get it going. So I feel like I was a bit waffling around that one, but hopefully that makes sense.
Makes absolute sense. And I've got loads of questions around that, because I love what you say about finding the balance. And certainly what I've learned over the years is everyone's balance point is different. So like you say, you've got one of your team that's kind of your pushback that you figure out, like you use him almost as a lever to go, how am I pushing the team, right? But I bet you within your team you have some people that really like they need that balance to be moving for them to feel satisfaction in their role and to feel like they're growing, and others where they're a bit on the other side and they need a bit more time to process. So how do you manage that balance in your team?
That's a really good question, actually. I think we're not a huge team, so you can connect. So I think it gets bigger when it's harder when it gets bigger. So in my team personally, there's 20 people, So you can really get to know the team and understand where they're at. I think also it is about what the challenges in their day job as well. So if someone is hugely occupied in their day job, you're probably not going to try and enlist them onto the project. You might leave them just fix around and then free them up and move them on. So there's that workload element, but I think you're alluding to some people find change harder than others, and sometimes it is harder to bring people along. I think, and then this might sound a bit challenging, a bit directorish, but I think you've got to have people that are on the bus. When I first landed, said, look, we're going through this change. I've been brought in to professionalize our team. We are moving forward. So, this is why we should do it. This is what the benefits are for you. But you do need to be on the bus. This is what's happening.
Yeah.
It's unfortunately, I'm not going to change my mind and suddenly change direction because this isn't something you want to do. So there is a direction of travel that you work with people to help them understand. You work with them to make sure that you're not missing anything. Very, very important. You ask lots and lots and lots and lots of questions to really understand the status quo and why things might be more challenging, why people might not be able to change. But there turns into a bit of a tipping point where if they're not really up for it, maybe they might need to go and find another role because the change is happening. And it might sound a bit callous, but you do need people that really want to make it work. And sometimes that happens, and people do then. Colleagues might make a choice to say, well, you know what, I'm not really up for all this change. It sounds too hard work for me. And if that's the case, I'm sure we'll end up working in the future again together. But it wasn't the right time for you to be with us on that journey. And I think that's also a really important leadership point when you are leading these projects. You do really need people with you that are going to buy into it and lead it, because ultimately they're the ones that deliver it. So they have to be on the bus, which is my terminology. So that might be the kind of bit director in there, but it is very important that everybody's pushing in the right direction, because if you have got detractors, and I'm not saying that you just sack people because they're not on the bus. You've got to help them get on the bus. You don't just go, right, well, you clearly no. It takes
just leave the bus and it's just you driving. Yeah, that's not a good sign.
Yeah, exactly. If it's just you left on the bus driving with no one left, it's not probably the best place to be. But you give everybody as much opportunity as possible, but there is a point where sometimes you do have to make a call, and I think that's kind of what I'm alluding to. That and you do have to temper. Some people find it change hard, so you have to really work with them and coach them and support them through that. But they might want to do it, but it's the people that then might say, "Well, actually, do you know what? I'm not up for this." Well, actually, that's what we're doing. So that's where the kind of line gets drawn. So you've got to learn where that line is, because I think sometimes projects fail very much because of the people, and it's about everybody moving forward, in the direction that we're all trying to travel. Someone gave me this lovely analogy. It said, in Tesco in like the 90s, it was people used to think that Tesco was like a Ferrari because it couldn't do any wrong. It was growing like for like amazing sales, and from the outside it looked like a Ferrari, but if you were in the inside, everybody knew it was a 4 Cortina. But they were all lined up behind the 4 Cortina, pushing it really quickly. And I think that was the power of that team, and they had generated, was that they had still the poorest processes and systems and stuff that we had in all of the other retailers. But they had just worked out how to line everybody up behind their vision and their belief and get it moving. And I think in any change project, if you can get everybody lined up behind that 4 Cortina, it doesn't have to be a Ferrari. You can make that 4 Cortina move really, really quickly if everybody's absolutely moving in the right direction.
And I love that. And there is an assumption that the best people are always the ones yelling and desperate for change.
Yeah.
Right. And for me,
Yeah.
there are 3 types of individual you need to have. You need to have the people that are really excited about change, right? The ones that are going to just be at the front doing that. You've got the people in the middle that actually they quite enjoy change as long as it's not too much change and they've got all their things in place, and they're sitting in the middle going, yeah, right, let's get the bulk of the people normally sit in that box, are sitting there. And then you need the people at the back that really hate change but are willing to go for it because actually they believe in the vision and they want to get on. They want to get off the bus as quickly as possible, but they're willing to get on it in the first place, right?
Yeah.
And those are the people that will stay at the destination that you're going to drop them off at and keep things running while the rest of you go off and change something else. And so
that's good. I agree with that. Yeah.
And it's the balance. And I think the art of transformation leadership is actually figuring out what the balance, because if you get too much of it, if you get the wrong balance in any one of those parts, you get too many people at the front end getting really excited about the new shiny toy versus those who are actually going to do the hard work and the heavy lifting, then things don't work as well as they can. And like you said about, you have to get everybody on the bus, but at different points they will get off. Some people just literally just go round and round on the bus and they just never get off. But there will be others that jump on and off at a point that's applicable to them.
Yeah. I really like that, and I think it has a little nod to the makeup of a really diverse team as well. There are. I think, I don't know where it's called different things, but it's kind of we do it in Evri, which is kind of called colours, which is it's like an insights profiling. And it's like 4 types of people, and you do need a really strong balance of a team. If I had recruited everybody like me, or had everybody like me around me to try and land change, it would be an almighty collapse and failure. Because it's not because people, my personality type, but it is the balance of everybody coming together. You need the studious completer finishers. You need the people that have got vision. You need the people that are really high up on the change curve. You need the people that are going to knuckle down and get things done. You need the people that are going to tell you when you're not right, and the skeptics that then say, well, it's not going to work. And you go, tell me why it's not going to work. And you need the people that are going to challenge your thinking. But you also need the people that glue the team together as well. Those sensing people that are on that journey, and they can see that actually the change is having an impact on people, and therefore give you a tap on the shoulder and say, you might be pushing a bit hard. So that blend of those different types of individual is required for any winning team, but through change it is as equally important.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. And I love the way you described some of the individuals within that team as well. And we talk so much about diversity as being biological. So sex, race, ethnicity, all those kind of things. But I don't think we talk enough about diversity of personality traits, of thought, of backgrounds as well. We've got people from different So for me, that's what makes change exciting, is it opens up opportunities that are outside of the typical definitions of diversity, and actually gives and allows you to bring people in and get different schools of thought as well.
And ultimately that is what diversity is. And I think people do get hung up on the diversity is all to do with race, color, creed, etc. But it is actually really about lived experience, and that could be through businesses, it could be through where you grew up, your nationality, it could be anything actually. But all that eclectic mix of people that aren't like me but give me different ideas and different thinking is absolutely one of the best cocktails for any change program. And I worked quite hard at the start. It wasn't just, you're not on the change journey, you're not on the bus. It was about, right, how do I get a fantastic balance of people that are really bought into this, that are going to challenge me and help me take this on the journey with all great ideas? Because I think as a leader, sometimes you feel like you have to come up with all of the ideas. but you need to set the direction with some input, sometimes a lot of input from the team, but it's ultimately the team to fill in the gaps and help you get there. So, they will be the ones that take you there. So you've got to be able to, I've had bosses before almost write down exactly, Janet and John, what you're going to do in this change program. And this is exactly what you're going to do. It's probably the least empowering thing I've ever felt in my life. So you really don't want to do that. You want to set frameworks for people that enable them to be really, really enjoy it. But then that's where you get that diversity of thought, because other people, sometimes they thought about, could we do it this way? Could we do it that way? How do we then generate this? And that trial, I think you mentioned it right at the top, actually, test and trial, and really kind of just trying to play with ideas as well, and just try and remove the fear of failure and replace it with, if it didn't work, that's all right, but what did we learn about what, that process or that approach, and then let's try it again. And that perpetual kind of learning. There is a real stigma in this, really in this world, about almost like you try something new, you should be able to do it with mastery, and it's just completely garbage, isn't it? You can't, because you've never done it before. And I've never done ODBC connections or APIs. I didn't even know the word, and therefore, when we can try and do that in Evri for the first time, it's not going to go perfectly. It's not going to go right first time. But you learn from it, and then you go, actually, now I know, maybe actually we should do it slightly differently, this way or that way. So, and you evolve as you go. But I do think it all kind of leads back to that. There's that kind of diversity of thought comes through, and you have a really eclectic team that is really up for the change. But then it's that real test and trial, and allowing them to be able to be empowered and play with it, so that to then land it. It can't just be, we're going on this journey, and this is the project plan, and this is exactly what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it. I do believe that you need to allow the team to find their way through that. It does sometimes take a little longer, but I think you get a lot more buy-in and a lot more engagement along the way.
I think that autonomy piece is really important, as you said, giving them the freedom to make choices. You can tell them the destination, you can tell them where you need to end up and what you need to achieve, but actually they get to choose the method of travel. And maybe sometimes you need to give them a time frame as well, so they do end up there at the right time. But it is important. And you also said something really interesting about, you need people involved in your project that can challenge you and give you, like you say, be that cynic, because there's always a danger, isn't there, that people go, oh, you're giving me problems and reasons this won't work, that you're a detractor, you don't want this change. And that's not always the case. And I think finding that balance, I'd love to know how you figure out where the line is between being a negative influence on change versus giving really good criticism, constructive criticism around the solution that's provided.
It's a difficult balance, and when you have probably experienced more challenging change before that hasn't worked, you are going to come maybe from a place that it doesn't. But there's a couple of people in my team that I really respect because of their honesty, and I respect them enough that I know when they talk to me that they're not doing it from a negative standpoint. They're doing it from you need to know this because this could trip us up. So that is really about understanding people and respecting them. I think it's generally, most people don't do things from a negative viewpoint, even though they sound negative as well. I think we're all wired a bit differently. I'm ridiculously over positive, and they all laugh at me because I always just think it's going to just land fine. But unless I have people around me that go, not sure that's right, Mark, actually, have you thought about this? No, I haven't. Have you thought about this? No, I haven't. But let's work out how we're going to do it. So then the positivity comes in and goes, well, let's get rid of those issues then. So I don't think you always need to give people the voice, the opportunity in your team to give them the air to sound their concerns. There is a tendency that you might want to kind of almost go, oh, but they should be fine because this and this. But you can't do that, because actually the reason why they're raising it is because they are actually worried, or there's something that's coming down that, there's something in there that you don't know about. Sometimes it is a fear of change, and it is quite hard to sniff. But there were a couple of times where I kind of realised that, yeah, this is because you're worried about where it's going to go. So this is almost like a bit of a smokescreen. We need to kind of slow this down. That's a classic. Like, because we've not got all our ducks in a row, because what happens if? So I'm not a big fan of what happens if, because it hasn't happened, has it? So you can't hypothesize and pontificate about the fact that something's going to go wrong. You can think about what might go wrong and the risks of the project, and then put some proper mitigation in. And some of it might be warranted, but some you might decide to proceed at risk with. But there will be some of your team that will throw up things that are really because they don't want to do it or they're worried about it. And it does take, you just have to kind of navigate through and try and work out, from your own experience as well. I might have done this before. So actually what they're saying here might not be right, or let's go and chat to another couple of people. Joe said this. What do you think, Lynn? Is that similar to, do you feel that kind of worry, or is that something that's going to come through? Or is it more just actually someone who's, one of the team is a bit concerned about the change? So you kind of just got to navigate around it, but it is tricky, I would say. It is tricky because I would just always probably lean to find out a bit more and keep asking questions around why they're worried about it and what are the issues, and then just try and then kind of almost head them off and go, right, well, okay, so there's issue 1, issue 2, issue 3, issue 4, risk 1, risk 2. Let's go and work through them, and let's just think about what's the worst that could happen off the back of it. What risk are we going to accept, and which ones are we going to mitigate?
I like that. So really focusing on what is the why behind the concern. Is it useful, valid concern, or is there something else driving that conversation? And yeah, no, I love that. And it is about knowing your team, right? And that's hard. If you're coming in to deliver change, and you've got a new team, that is a hard piece to do and to get hold of. And then change alongside it as well. So
I think also, it's a new industry for me, as you said at the top. It has really taken me about a year to properly understand the business and the mechanics and the levers that I can pull from a commercial point of view. I understood the concepts quite quickly, but I've built my knowledge over time. Coming in and trying to land change really quickly is quite difficult when you're new to the business, because you don't really know the nuances, and there is context you're missing. So just be careful about assuming things and ways of working, and ask much more questions up front about the change and the things that affect what you're going to do, because you could drive yourself quite easily into wrong-way streets, or into cul-de-sacs, because you haven't done your due diligence. And businesses are quite complex and can carry with them a few risks from that basis. So I don't think we've driven into a huge amount of cul-de-sacs because of trying to start the change early, but I've certainly evolved the model that fits the business better as we've gone through the year.
Because we've talked a lot about sort of moving at the right pace for the team. I also think there's sometimes a piece about the right pace of the business, because each business, I feel, has its own momentum process that it works to. Like, some organizations work really slow, others move at a rate of knots, and I think sometimes balancing your team's pace, are you at the level of the business, in what pace is the business at, and aligning that is again a big challenge for anyone in that leadership role. And I think you talk about pace, and in that it links back to what's the expectations of the business of your change too. So I was brought in to help operations finance be the best that they could be. Quite a bit of that is centered around how we improve our reporting and our data structures, but it also includes the people, how we business partner. It includes the processes around it, the control mechanisms. You have to keep your stakeholders on with you. So I know that
my CEO, he's very driven. He really pushes the business forward. He's really, really passionate, and I really enjoy working with him. But you do need to manage your stakeholders so that they understand that actually some of this stuff does take time, and there's a belief piece where you've not only to take your team on that journey and help them and celebrate along the way, but you can't do it quietly in a corner. You have to make sure that people realize within the wider business what you've delivered. So you kind of need to crow about your successes. That's one thing. Again, accountants aren't always that great about.
Not good.
Some of it will organically come out. So our business partnering has naturally got much better because we have more time to business partner. Our financials have improved. Our satisfaction of how we partner operations, I know, has improved, and my CEO can see it. That only really happened because of the change that we have been doing. So they're experiencing the output, but sometimes it takes a bit of time for that to come through. So they don't see the architecture that we've built behind that now houses all our data on a data warehouse that no one can see. They don't see the hard work that we've done by moving the flash from one part of the team to the other, because it's still the same flash. It happens to come out a lot quicker, so they do see that. So, you do need to, these stakeholders, they're the ones that ultimately are bankrolling your project, and if you don't manage them. And so I always have, every 2 weeks, I have a catch up with my CFO, and I have a couple of the project team on it, and we chat about what we've delivered. We chat about the challenges we've had, but we celebrate success with him so that he can then talk, and he can also help and be an advocate for our department about what we're doing. So I wouldn't really be careful of not managing your stakeholders enough, because some of the change you're doing isn't visible to the business, and it'd be quite easy for them to assume that you weren't. And if you weren't in the room, and they were like, "Hang on, why is Smart not in the room? Why is he spending all his time with his team?" You got to explain to people why you're doing what you're doing, but also show them demonstrable deliverables. What is it I've got now that and actually explaining that you've got more business partnering times, and it's quite hard to do, isn't it? But you can see that through the way that you interact, and they can see the way that we're building the relationships with them. But also they're now asking me, quite rightly, where's my reporting? Where's my new reporting? And that's starting to come together. But if I don't then deliver a new report or something that showcases what we're doing, they're going to be like, hang on a minute, Mark's spending a lot of time here, he's spending some money, he's spending resources. How come I've not seen anything yet? So managing your stakeholders is critical along the way, as much as it is about taking your team. It's more important to take your team on the journey. But if you don't manage your stakeholders, at your peril.
And in most cases, I find it's a lot easier to manage them up front than when you don't deliver. So actually that's one tip I will have, is a lot of people who just go along when they first get deadlines and go, we can deliver that. Make sure you can, because that first deadline sets the tone for the rest of your project. Yeah. And I always say to people, give yourself wiggle room. Like, put more at the end. If you deliver it early, no one's going to complain, but you shove it, give yourself some space, because like you say, you've got that roll up, that builds up that momentum, and that's so important. It's, stakeholders, huge.
I completely align to that. I think you're absolutely right. I think it's a brilliant tip. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, we absolutely, I've taken up so much of your time, Mark, but thank you so much for a fabulous session. I think I could just keep asking you questions and talking about transformation for hours. I won't, I promise. But I really want to say a massive thank you. And have you got any last top tips or things we haven't mentioned that, just for people to take away and think about?
Yeah. I've also found it really pleasurable. Actually, thank you for inviting me along, and those who know me well will know that I do like to talk a lot. So right down my street, and I hope that some of my ramblings have made some sense. But I think the one piece I would be a bit of advice is that I think that I've done reasonable amount of work in this space. There's some brilliant people that are doing some good work in this space too, but we have to evolve as finance. And we've talked about some of the processes and the structural changes, maybe a little more, but actually a lot of the change that we're now facing into at the moment is around technology, how we use AI, how we use analytical tools, how we use the data more effectively. Ultimately, we are moving into a state of the fact that we need to be much better analysts and use new tools. Excel to me is dead, and we need to move forward into the tools that actually are more productive and effective. But it's a bit worrying. We don't know how to do it. Being of the generation that I am, I didn't grow up with Facebook. It came later, and I didn't have the mobile phones that we have now, and therefore, I'm probably just right on the edge of being able to understand some of the tech that's coming through. But some of the tech that is coming through is phenomenal and is going to really, really help accountants. But if we do not embrace it, we will die. And you will have the data scientists, the data analysts, the BI professionals come in and say, well, I can do your job better. But I think that the one thing that we have as finance professionals, especially in a commercial context, is the fact that we have the ability to translate and understand, connect the business to the data, and then also look forward and present that data in a way that then enables us to understand where we're going. And unless we take that space and own it, I think that there is a bit of a challenge for us as finance leaders. So my one kind of big tip is embrace this, embrace technology. Don't everybody's a bit worried about it because it's change and it's different and there's fear in there, but please invest in that. And if you've got a bit of time every week, have a look at how you can invest in tech, how you can read around it, how you can find new courses, how you can explore it, because we have some brilliant behaviors and some brilliant ways of doing business, but we do need to embrace some of this new tech that's coming down.
I love that. And it's not just about new tech. And I think we talk a lot about, there's always about the new shiny tool, but it could just be the stuff you already have. And I say this a lot to people, is just get the value from it. Don't assume you need something brand new. It could just be some fabulous tech that you just didn't even know you have. So I love that tip though, because it is worrying how fast technology is developing versus the speed at which finance is changing. And I think we all, again, it was one of the reasons I started this podcast. We need to find ways to transform and change faster. So, hey,
I agree.
I love how you actually, I talk a lot about getting rid of spreadsheets in people's systems. And it's great to hear hear someone else say it rather than me all the time. So thank you so much, Mark. It has been a genuine pleasure. Loved it, and might try and nag you to find another slot in the not too distant future to come back on and share your learnings and experiences. It's been fab.
Yeah, I'd love that. Thank you.
So for any of our listeners, Mark, obviously, I know you're obviously full-time doing your day job at Evri, but I know you really enjoy coaching and mentoring, and you share some brilliant content on your LinkedIn. So if anyone wants to learn more about, you as an individual and what you do, how do they find you? What's the best place to reach out and contact?
Yeah, it is probably LinkedIn. So I'm, as you said, Hannah, I'm massively passionate about coaching and mentoring, and I do that internally within Evri, but I'm also trying to explore doing that a bit more with individuals who are really trying to take their careers onto another level. So love transformation, but I also love really developing people. So if anybody did want to reach out, they can have a look at some of my my service page on LinkedIn, and you can see some examples of the people that I've worked with. But also, if you just want to reach out to me through LinkedIn, also we can see whether we could work together on career development.
No, absolutely. And I think it's so important as people go through transformation, it is a skill. And we were saying just before we started this podcast that the reality is we learn most from our mistakes. And actually the value of a coach and a mentor is they help you avoid the obvious ones and you get to do some new ones that we haven't come across.
Yeah.
So a massive thank you, Mark, for joining us. And for all of our listeners, if there's anything on this podcast you found particularly insightful, useful, you want more of, then do reach out. If there's questions I should have asked Mark that you're thinking of, why didn't she ask that? Just reach out. And again, I may twist his arm and convince him to come back and talk another time, all about transformation. So thank you again, Mark. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you soon on the CFO podcast.